Just for some of you that don't know, how many people here are affiliated with the drilling industry? The drilling industry of any kind, you do anything. Yeah, okay, just understand, those people can probably hurt the rest of you, so be quiet. We can amass them on our side. If I asked that question several years ago, we'd have maybe a hand, you know. So it's terrific to have that much interest coming in. The other thing that I thought was interesting is how many people are affiliated with utilities here? Utilities, come on, don't be, I know, you generally shy people, but there's a bunch of you. And also, the same thing, we would have maybe 1 or 2 people total from utilities. So those are 2 big areas that we've definitely made a lot of headway. But some of the folks that have been supporting us from the beginning are manufacturers, and I want to have John Thomas come up here as a gold sponsor and talk to us a little bit about their support. They have been the longest supporter of NY-GEO from the beginning, substantial funding when others were not doing that, and I have to say we really appreciate it. A lot of our success is due to that, so want to have John give a go. You can either take this or you can. Yeah.
Thank you, John, and welcome everybody. Ground source heat pump. Wanted to get that out of the way early. Anybody remember Saturday Night Live? John Belushi running a hamburger shop, cheeseburger. Oh, you got to be over like 45 years old to remember that. Ground source heat pump, that's what this is going to sound like up here the rest of the day. 2 years ago, the New York GEO team's kind enough to give the sponsors, this is the easiest decision on sponsoring a conference that we make every year. With the energy that's in this room and the show of hands this morning of first-time attendees, it's great to have new people continually coming in that are interested. 2 years ago, I commented briefly on the Patriots, and we needed more Patriots, and that was a shout-out for Bill Nowak, who is, we're not in New York City, I won't say the godfather, but he's the father of this organization. So Bill, a shout-out to you. He's going to speak here in a little bit. A little round of applause. Last year, I talked about why are you here and being part of the change for good. And this year, I'll just steal another quote from a presenter that I heard last fall, and that is, if you think what you thought, you get what you got. And I just ask you to reflect on that. For those of you who are here for the first time or those of you who are here attending again, today is about learning some things that may change your thinking so we don't keep thinking what we thought and getting what we got, because we may want something different. And I guess if we could have Jens Ponekau's presentation this morning flashing on the energy utilization of Zero Place in New Paltz, New York, that's an example of thinking differently. And it actually kind of reminds you of a twist on the phrase, more is less. More GEO is actually lowering fundamentally the demand on the grid and actually changing and assisting how we go through this energy transformation. We're trying to change energy infrastructure of the last 100 years. Rory was talking about that this morning. It's not easy, and it's going to be a little messy, but it's still the right thing to be focused on for multiple reasons. So if you think what you thought, you get what you got. More is less. And then I'll just twist it and say, if we build what we've always built and design buildings the same way, we're going to get more of what we got. So let's think what we want, and maybe we'll get closer to what we need. Thank you.
Thanks so much, John. And thanks very much for your support. I mean, again, WaterFurnace has been the strongest supporter of this organization right from the beginning, and we appreciate that they continue to do so. And then we have some newer supporters. So we're going to have Gino come up here. Gino Rezze is from Groundheat, world famous in Canada, less well known here, but we're working on that slowly but slowly. And he says he's Canadian, but I think he's really Italian. Or maybe he says he's Italian, but he's really Canadian. Get that straightened out for us.
I did go to university in the States, so I'm somewhat, and I have my social security number.
American.
Yeah. John said everything I wanted to say, so I can't say any more, but just this is my 45th year in doing geothermal and the first borehole in Canada. And I've been doing work in different parts of the world, including US and Canada. I'm very happy to sponsor in any way New York Geothermal. For great work that have been accomplished by this committee, New York must succeed in electrification by 2029. So it can be the trailblazer for other states and other countries. So thank you for allowing us to sponsor this key event. Told you, John said everything.
Thank you, Gino, and thanks so much for your support, really. All right, now I'm going to bring Jeff Hammond up here. He is the Executive Director of the International Ground Source Heat Pump Association, affectionately known as IGSHPA. To those of you that don't know that, we're not kidding. Yeah, get rid of that. I mean, Ryan's a great guy, but we don't all want to be Ryan. Well, maybe that would be an improvement for me. So Jeff Hammond's going to talk to us a little bit about what IGSHPA is doing these days. And his entrance as the executive director has really been fundamentally good for that organization, and we're really glad to be partnered with them. He's working on the national level, and we're working more on the state level. So let's get Jeff Hammond up here and tell us what's going on.
Thank you, John. Always great to be here. It's like getting re-energized when I make it to New York. And I always tell people what happens in New York, we just need to spread to the rest of the country and North America, in fact. I get, they always joke about my picture. It's a little washed out. It looks like a stained glass window. I get asked, is that a church that you got a picture in front of? I say, yeah, that's the Church of Geothermal. So I probably need to change that picture. But to John's point, just an update since last year. It's great to have the opportunity to provide some details on what's happening with IGSHPA. And I'll just go through those quickly. I think I have about 5 minutes, so I got to talk quickly. It's great having an MC who keeps us on schedule. I need to do that with our conference. 4.5 minutes. Oh, 4.5 now. Talk quickly. So it was great to see all the hands, first-timers here. So some of you may not have heard of IGSHPA. It started in 1987 at Oklahoma State University. Why we thought that was a good acronym that nobody could pronounce, I'm not sure, but I am glad that ground source heat pump is in the name. So we validated that this morning with the speakers. But just so you have an idea, in 2020, IGSHPA became an independent nonprofit, no longer part of Oklahoma State. We're a 501c6 trade organization, and we are working with a lot of people in this room to really include the entire industry. So a part of that is updating membership, updating training, and working with as many stakeholders as we can in the industry. So we have grown a lot. We went from 0 employees in 2020. We have 6 now. Last year when I was here, we only had 2. So we are moving quickly. Thank you very much. If you haven't looked at our membership program recently, we do have a brand new membership program. So we have some directory-only memberships, as well as all the way up to benefactor memberships. We have retirees now as a membership option, and a lot of different ways that you can be part of IGSHPA. I'm happy to say that we also have an agreement with NY-GEO. NY-GEO is a member of IGSHPA, and IGSHPA is a member of NY-GEO. So we're thrilled to be members of NY-GEO, and we're really happy to have them as members of IGSHPA. On the training, I spent some time this morning with our manufacturing partners talking about all the new training. And so you'll see that video, but you can always go to the IGSHPA website to see the training that we currently have. And we'll start announcing a lot of the new modules that will be available over the next 2 years. We're actually taking our accredited installer and modularizing that based upon job functions. So that'll make it a lot more accessible, bring in a lot more workforce, and we're pretty excited about the new training programs. You'll see probably 10 to 12 new training modules over the next 2 years. Some of the other updates, we do have a new committee, a utility committee. We want to include utilities as much as possible. They're certainly very important to the growth of our industry. There's a new advocacy and marketing committee task force. All right, so just a few more updates. We do have the National Geothermal Month. If you haven't heard about that, please look for your social media posts and reshare if you would. We're celebrating Earth Day, which is towards the end of the month, so that's something that has, I think, really been a big hit. We need to get more attention. We also have a job database that we're working on. We'd really love to have the New York jobs in there, so reach out if you want to be included. And finally, we have the next conference is a little bit more than a year away. We're moving it back to March. So it's a year and 3 months, but it's going to be in Champaign, Illinois. It'll be in the Midwest next time. We're partnering with Geothermal Alliance of Illinois for this next conference. And we have a research conference coming up in May in Montreal. So we would love to have you at our conferences. And we certainly appreciate all that NY-GEO is doing working with IGSHPA. So thanks for having me, and great seeing everyone. Appreciate the time.
Thanks so much. Now I'm going to bring Ryan Dougherty up here, president of GEOExchange organization, does a lot of the federal work, policy work for us, and takes the lead on that. And he's got his own timer because he doesn't want to be harassed by me. But I'm watching you.
Thank you.
And the rest of you,
Thank you,
too.
John. The Mussolini of New York Geo. He is a benevolent dictator, though. Thank you, Il Duce. Just give me the hook. I do have the timer going here. So Ryan Dougherty with GEOExchange. It's great to be back. I usually do this during the dinner thing, so people are a little more lubricated at that point, but seems like a lively bunch nonetheless. We are really the partner organization of IGSHPA, focused on public policy, primarily at the federal level, but increasingly at the state level as well. If I might be given just a quick moment to toot our own horn, a lot of dialogue about the Inflation Reduction Act. This is rightly noted as groundbreaking legislation, some of the most aggressive climate policy and industrial policy in our nation's history. It didn't just come out of the ether, although Joe Manchin did drop it like a bomb, kind of late in the session. There was a lot of work that we put into the IRA, and it would not look like it currently does had we not been involved. And it's a testament to the work of a small grassroots group. We don't have an unlimited lobbying budget. We've got a little bit of money and a great team in DC, and a number of people in the industry, many of whom are here today, who are just dogged and tenacious. And that's what wins the day in Congress. Yes, money helps, but if you're persistent and you're consistent and persuasive, you can win. And the IRA passed. It was enacted almost 20 months ago, and I thought, well, work's done here. It's up to Jeff to build the workforce of the future, and I can focus on some other things. No, there's been a tremendous amount of work on the back end of the IRA, and we are still to this day engaged in a whole host of implementation issues. I'm glad that certain things like the 1 megawatt threshold for prevailing wage and apprentices has kind of been clarified to some extent. But there's lots more work to do, and we continue to stay engaged in that. We'll be back in Washington in just a couple weeks to meet with our champions on both sides of the aisle. That's the fun thing about being a geothermal advocate. You're beloved throughout Congress. We go to some of the reddest offices in Congress. We went and saw Senator Mark Wayne Mullen the day after he threatened to punch up the Teamsters president in a Senate hearing room and was told to sit down by Bernie Sanders. He's got a geothermal heat pump in his ranch. He loves us. we go to see Bernie Sanders, and he loves us for a different set of reasons, but it's great to have such strong bipartisan support within Congress, and we're looking to capitalize on that. I don't want to steal the thunder of Alexis McKittrick, who has been a wonderful partner, but I do want to pay some credence or give some kudos to the work of DOE and the federal agencies. The level of support within the federal government for our technology and our industry is unprecedented, and it goes beyond the wonderful team at the Geothermal Technologies Office. Increasingly, NREL, the National Laboratories, the Loan Programs Office, the Building Technologies Office are all recognizing the value of geothermal heating and cooling. And so to see that cross-cutting interest amongst the feds is really, really gratifying. And it's due in large part to the work of Alexis and her team. So beyond the federal level, there's a lot of fun stuff happening, exciting activities around the country. And GEOExchange is really in a mode of building out our capacity because in a lot of states, the policies and the programs and the priorities are being set right now to guide the clean energy future in those states. The sort of landscape, the next 30 to 50 years are being plotted in states like Michigan, where they passed very ambitious clean energy legislation at the end of last year. Well, how is Governor Whitmer's bill in Michigan going to come to fruition? They have one of the dirtiest generation mixes in the country. We have to have a seat at the table when they're devising these plans. We've seen what happens when we're absent from the conversation. You get utility policy and technical reference manuals that don't properly account for the efficiencies of ground source. So it's imperative that we have a seat at the table in states like Michigan and New Jersey, in Minnesota. This is the year of geothermal in Minnesota. There's 9 different pieces of legislation moving through the state legislature there, 2 of which we are really spearheading. And we hope to see some great things come out of that state in addition to others. New York, you guys pretty well have it handled here. But Christine, John, Jens, Zach, we collaborate routinely, and it's a great partnership. John, Thomas, and I, and several other people went to the EPRI conference recently. I never expected to see and hear utility executives talking about the potential of geothermal heating and cooling. And it really will be the utility industry that takes us to the next level, undoubtedly. He's coming closer. Not beyond the utilities, also colleges and universities. I met with somebody from Smith College last week. If you add up all the faculty and staff at all the institutions of higher education in the United States, it's like the 3rd most populous state in the country. And we're seeing universities and colleges take 6 minutes. All right. I'll wrap it up and just say thank you to IGSHPA. Please attend their conference next year in Urbana-Champaign. As Zainab Magavi says, this is the work of winning. I don't know where Zainab is, but I'm stealing that catchphrase. We've got to continue to work on winning. We're making great strides, but if we continue to collaborate, we can do it. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Ryan. All right. So we're going to switch to a New York Geo update, and we're going to start with Bill Nowak, who's currently leading our legislative subcommittee, and he's on the board of directors after being the executive director for 8 years, something like that, 8 and change anyway. And right from the beginning, from that Geopalooza first thing that we did in Saratoga, Bill was with us, and we're really glad that he's hung with us even as we've moved to a different executive director. So I want to have Bill come up and talk about legislative priorities. And you can use this or that.
Okay. Does this advance it?
Thank you. This is amazing, looking out at all these faces, all these people doing this incredibly important work. We are in a very dynamic moment, and in many ways we are winning, but there are struggles all across the board, and we are winning some, losing others. It is very dynamic. The fossil fuel interests in this state have amassed resources, are doing robocalls against New York's climate plans, and are really presenting a formidable force. And I want you to think about our legislative priorities in that context. I'm going to start by talking about some of the things that have already been won to some extent, and as the workshop talked about, you know, this is now the work of winning. And I'm going to start with the digging deeper than 500 feet. There was a reference to that this morning from Christine, and Senator Harcum was a leader on this, along with Assemblymember Glick. This was a bill that's going to make it easier for geothermal drillers to go below 500 feet. Under current law, we would then be oil and gas, and we would deal with the bureaucracy and the expense of what oil and gas. Okay. Yep. Good. One more. Yep. Okay. So that was something that we won, but we are now dealing with the regulations that go with that, and there's going to be a lot of work, and I got to really commend the people on the board and Christine Hoffer who are working on that. The new efficiency New York proceeding is the one that the rebates have been coming through for the last 5 years. That's going through a transition now. We will be submitting comments April 15th on that. It's coming up soon. This coming Friday, we do a weekly talk session at 3 p.m. And we're going to be discussing what our comments are going to be, what changes we would like to see in that program. If you'd like to be involved with that discussion, you're going to see my email in the next slide. Please send me an email. I will get you in as part of that discussion. A third item, Con Ed select pricing. This is an amazing process. Basically, when people have geothermal, they are overpaying for their electricity in most cases. And between the folks from NY-GEO and other places and Con Ed, there has been figured out a way to do it based on demand as opposed to kilowatt hour usage. It is saving people 18% on their electric bills where this has been put in place. Pay attention to that as it moves forward. Certainly thermal energy networks is an important piece moving forward. Several people on the board and many of you are involved with that. That's an important thing to look at. Geo as storage that saves the electric grid. I'm not going to say any more about that. Jens talked about it. Alexis will be talking about it. It's a really important point, and I hope you will be able to take this back into your communities. We expected the New York State budget to be resolved when this conference happened, but it hasn't. And everyone in this room has an opportunity right now to play an important role on 2 bills that are key to the geothermal industry in New York State. You might not realize it, but you have incredible credibility with legislators. When you come in, you are the people that are creating jobs in their communities, creating wealth in their communities, and really actualizing the decarbonization goals. So be confident and make your opinions known with the legislature. The geothermal tax credit is currently a 25% tax credit capped at $5,000. There is a bill that was put forward by the New York State Senate that will make that a $10,000 cap. Okay, thanks, John. And we'll make it refundable. This could really make a difference in terms of the way geothermal works in New York State. I would like everyone in the room, and maybe not New York State employees, to take a picture of this slide, and please follow through on what you're going to be able to do with a picture of this slide. So, in addition to the geothermal tax credit, there's the New York Heat Act. And the New York Heat Act has 3 main provisions. The first 2 protect ratepayers from continuing to subsidize gas infrastructure that will lay in the ground unused as stranded assets if we are successful in reducing emissions from using gas. And the third provision protects ratepayers by capping the % of their income they pay for energy bills. You can have an influence on these 2 pieces getting into the budget. It is being negotiated right now. The first 2 items will give you the opportunity to email your legislators, and if you're not from New York, don't worry about it. Use an address from some of your affiliates, some of the people you're working with in New York. Get the message across. The third one is calling Assembly Member Carl Hasty. He is the Speaker of the Assembly. The Assembly has been the weaker player on these two bills. The Senate put them in full, the Governor put them in partially, but the Assembly has been a weak player on this. Oh, moved it forward again. And the last piece is a business support memo. A support memo from a business coming to the legislature at this point would be really key. If you're interested in doing that, please take my email and get in touch with me. I will make it very, very easy for you to do this. This is an incredible moment. I see all these people in this room. If half of you act, it would be a major impact on the way the legislature is moving forward at this point. Please take a picture of this slide, follow through, and get in touch with us. Thank you.
All right, I'm going to bring up, needs no introduction, hopefully at this point, but Christine Hoffer is going to run us through some of the other initiatives that we have with NY-GEO. Take it away.
I'm going to promise to talk really, really super fast, so I'll try and keep up. Just once again, thank you to all of our sponsors. We can't do this without you. You wouldn't be eating lunch today if we didn't have a sponsor, so thank you, M&E Engineering, for sponsoring our lunch today. Our exhibitors, I see all the activity out there. It's fantastic. Thank you for exhibiting. Thank you for participating and engaging with them. We really appreciate that. We chatted earlier that this is NY-GEO's 10th anniversary. We're very excited about that. Please know Brooklyn will be a huge celebration, a giant anniversary birthday party, so make sure you make your reservations for that. This is a little bit of our history. I see people taking pictures of the slides. All of the slides will be available, so if you're a state employee, ignore the slide 3 forward from this, from Bill. The rest of you guys pay attention to that slide. But we'll go into a lot of detail about our history. Part of the history is our founding members. We had approximately 70 founding members, so we're going to have a little exercise session now. If you are a founding member of NY-GEO, would you please stand or raise your hand? Terrific. Thank you. If you are a member of NY-GEO, please raise your hand. Okay, everybody with a hand, look left and right. If they don't have their hand raised, it is your responsibility now to make them a member. Membership drives an organization like this. We are a not-for-profit trade association. Members allow for us to do what we do in addition to sponsors and exhibitors at events like this. So there's a little guilt factor there. So what you're going to get by becoming a member, you get to come to these types of events at a discount. These aren't cheap, but we give you a bit of a discount. And those of you that are members or want to be members, should be members, maximize your membership. We launched a new website last year, and there's lots of bells and whistles on that website. So they're little mini websites for yourself on the NY-GEO site. Makes us better searchable, and it makes you better searchable. That didn't quite come out right, but you know what I mean. In order to help us with our membership and what we're trying to do, we established working groups. We sent out a form about 4 months ago asking for people to participate. I'm going to send that to you again. Those of you that raised your hand, thank you so much for agreeing to participate in those working groups. So make sure you fill that out because we are here for you. We do what we do because of you, and we need you to be a part of all of the initiatives that we have going on across all of New York State. On the website, you can post your jobs, like Jeff was saying, on the IGSHPA site. So we'll have to talk about tag teaming on that and how we can connect our sites to do that. You can share your news and events. You guys are all doing some really amazing things throughout New York and the country. We want to share that information on our website and then share it with IGSHPA, who can share it with others. And we have the driller here who's also sharing lots of our stuff, and we really appreciate that. And then come to our conferences. Be a part of a sponsorship, be a part of an exhibitor, be a part of the conference by registering. We are playing really great with NYSERDA, so thank you so much, Donovan and his team. Scott Smith, I know, is here somewhere. Andrew Piper is unfortunately not able to be here, which is actually a good thing. He just had a little baby, so he's not able to be here with us today. But part of our consortia with them is to grow membership, grow geothermal installs, grow ground source heat pump sales, and to grow the workforce, and basically just to grow geothermal across New York State in all the ways that we can together. So part of that, the working groups, is to help us help you install more geothermal, install more ground source heat pumps. As Jeff said, we are partners with IGSHPA. I sit on the Advocacy Communication Task Force. Our first initiative was to launch National Geothermal Month, which we're very, very excited about. We had a soft rollout because we really put it together in about 3 months. I have two of my colleagues here today, Donna and Chad. So if they could just raise their hand and say hello. We meet monthly to advocate for geothermal and ground source heat pumps across the country, across the world, and National Geothermal Month is part of that. So like, share, ask us for these images. We have them. All of us together can raise the voice for what geothermal is and should be, and everybody should have it. In October, we will host a bigger one of these, the big party I just talked about. In Brooklyn. All of you that are registered here today will get a message from me with a secret handshake code to allow for you to register in Brooklyn at a bit of a discount. If you're already registered, sorry, I'm taking your money. No, I'm kidding. We'll give you some options. One is you could share that code with a colleague that might like to use that, issue a refund, or you can just make it as a donation to NY-GEO. We'll make sure we'll take care of everybody. Am I good, John? Where's John? He's not even anywhere near me. What's going on? Okay, so did I miss anything? I missed one very, very important thing. So I have one individual that gets to work with me pretty often, and that is JR. So where's JR? Where are you? Oh, there he is back there. So John Rath runs our Let's Talk programs. He sits in on 90% of the rate cases that are happening. I still don't know what they are, but he's doing that. He's the one that writes the memos to send in, so then any NY, the comments that we want to make on that, that's JR. So thank you so much, JR, for being just truly an awesome human being. Thank you so much. So now I get to introduce Alexis. So I'm going to thank you so much. This is so exciting. So it is my pleasure to introduce Alexis McKittrick. Did I say that right? McKittrick, sorry. She's a program manager with the U.S. Department of Energy's Geothermal Technologies Office, overseeing both the low temperature and co-produced resources and hydrothermal resources. I'm learning so many words in this job, I'm telling you. Research portfolios. In this role, she leads a team that supports research, development, and demonstrations across a range of geothermal technology platforms, including district heating and cooling systems, ground source heat pumps, there's that word again. Ooh. Geothermal heat pumps, there's that word again. Such a great word, or a series of words. Thermal energy storage, hydrothermal power production, advanced drilling technologies, enhanced characterizations of geothermal resources, and extractions of critical minerals from geothermal fluids. Woo! That's amazing. You are amazing. And she's a really powerful voice for females in the industry and on the planet, so thank you so much, Miss Alexis.
I think we're good. All right. Thank you. Thank you, first of all, to NY-GEO for having me. To Christine and John, thank you all so much. As has already been articulated, no, you all can't hear me. Can you all hear me in the back? Anybody help? Okay, thank you so much. I was getting a couple signs that maybe it was a little low. If I need to, can you all do me a favor in the back? If you start to not be able to hear me, can you just kind of give me a little hand wave? Awesome. Thank you. Much appreciated. So, as has already been mentioned, DOE is really excited to continue to partner with geothermal heat pump or ground source heat pump. I actually use both, but geothermal heat pumps is what's in the legislation. So, want to keep my job and use geothermal heat pump for the most part. But we can use those interchangeably, and we're excited to partner with everybody who's in the audience today and continue our work with IGSHPA, with GEOExchange, and with many folks in the audience who are working with us on projects. And what I'm going to do today is kind of walk through. You've heard a lot about the excitement, right, of GOE and the concentration and attention that we're paying to this space. What I'm going to do is kind of walk through that for everyone. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what we're doing in the Geothermal Technologies Office and some of the work that we've been putting out there and the initiatives that we're working on. But I'm also going to talk about other parts of the Department of Energy and how geothermal heat pumps are playing a really important role in initiatives from across COE and in a lot of cases across the federal government. And maybe I'll just start off with a little bit of level setting, because I never miss an opportunity to like demystify the federal government a little bit, right? So again, I'm with the Geothermal Technologies Office. As Christine mentioned, really appreciate her braving the title. I have the opportunity to actually manage 2 different technical programs within GEOE-GTO. Both the Hydrothermal Resources Group, which focuses on conventional geothermal power production and R&D that reduce risks and costs associated with that, so things like better advanced drilling technologies, critical mineral extraction from brines. And I also manage our low temperature and co-produced resources group, which is really where our geothermal heating and cooling, geothermal heat pump portfolio sits. I put this slide up here more to give you all a sense of this is one technical sub-program within a larger Geothermal Technologies Office. Enhanced Geothermal Systems focuses on what you do when you have heat at depth to produce power, but not fluid and permeability. So thinking about how can we stimulate the subsurface with water to engineer a geothermal reservoir. And our data modeling analysis group, which I will talk about more in just a minute, actually does cross-cutting, as the name suggests, modeling and analysis that is actually underpinning all of the research that we're doing at DOE. So with that as a quick introduction, I'm gonna do the zoom out first, which is, again, that DOE is really excited about the heat pump space. Has anybody in the room heard Secretary Granholm talk? Any, just quick show of hands, couple hands, okay. Secretary Granholm is a giant advocate for geothermal. Literally, I was getting pings right after she was confirmed. She went on The View of all different shows and was talking about geothermal energy on The View. Like that is, she brings it into every single opportunity that she has to speak and talk. And it's just, I mention it because we really have this advocate at the very highest levels within the federal government for geothermal. And that has absolutely percolated and helped as we are looking across the department at different initiatives that DOE is doing. So not only am I going to talk a bit about all the different projects that we're funding across the country, I'm going to talk about the Defense Production Act and the funding opportunities for heat pump manufacturing that have come out. I'm going to touch on tax incentives, which I think are pretty well known. We had a number of really great sessions, I understand, this morning. I was camped out in workforce, and we'll talk about that a little bit more later. But a lot of fantastic tax incentives at the federal level for geothermal heat pumps. And then also a little bit on education, on resources, on outreach, and how are we helping cultivate the next generation of geothermal leaders at DOE. So I have to start with our GHP impacts report. Okay, another show of hands. Who has read, or at least has read, the executive summary of the geothermal heat pump impact reports? Thank you, appreciate at least a handful of hands. I'll make sure to do the full backup. So this is a analysis that was done out of 2 national labs, Oak Ridge National Lab and the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, that looked at what happens if our dreams come true. Essentially, what happens if by 2050 we're able to deploy geothermal heat pumps to 70% of the US building stock. So within the next couple decades, geothermal heat pump systems are in 70% of US buildings. What would the results of that be? What would the effects be on the building electricity use? What would be the effect on emissions, right? We know they're going to go down, but help us understand how they're going to go down, how much. And then the impacts to that bulk power system and the broader decarbonization of the electric grid. This was alluded to earlier. And before I go into the results, I just want to say this was a big gap for this industry. There are analyses that focus on solar deployment, wind deployment, even geothermal power deployment going forward. But when asked to quote, what is the impact of more geothermal heat pumps, a lot of folks struggled to articulate what that future would look like. And that's something that this analysis was able to fill. It looked at 3 different scenarios, essentially one base scenario where we're just looking at kind of linear deployment of GHPs to 2050. The grid decarb scenario that is looking at what happens if the grid is, if we're meeting our current grid goals, our current clean energy goals, and we get to 95% of a decarbonized grid by 2035, and then that pesky last 5%, right, geothermal heat pumps can help with that, getting to 100% grid emissions decarbonized by 2050. And then the third scenario that we looked at essentially was both, right? It was combining that grid decarbonization scenario with economy-wide electrification of all end uses. And so each of these looked at that linear deployment of GHPs, which is, again, from 2020 to 2050, and then assumed that there was 100% essentially eligible retrofit. So it did kind of move past any concerns or questions about whether retrofits were possible, and just assume that for 70% of buildings that we were able to deploy this. And the results were absolutely beyond our expectations. So, as was alluded to earlier, the big finding here was actually not the efficiency of GHPs, which we already knew. It was the potential impact on the electric grid. You know, we talked a lot about GHPs and the potential to, shift away from natural gas for home heating, and building heating. But we don't talk enough about the impacts that these technologies can have to lower peak demand on the grid, and that their efficiencies can have on the overall load over time that's required from the electric grid. And what we found was that you actually would reduce by 2050 over 400 gigawatts of generation capacity needed, over 43,000 miles of transmission lines that wouldn't need to be built. This is a big question right now within the federal government and within our societies. If we're moving towards a decarbonized grid, if we're moving towards a clean energy future, how are we able to build all of the infrastructure that's needed to get us there? Well, geothermal heat pumps are going to reduce the amount of infrastructure that's needed. They're going to lower that bar for everyone when these are deployed at both commercial and residential buildings. And in addition to those fantastic grid benefits that we saw, perhaps unsurprisingly to a lot of folks in this room, we also saw giant carbon benefits, right? So 7 gigatons of CO2 equivalent that would essentially be removed from US emissions when you compare it to a 2022 baseline. So again, and that is only 70%, right, of buildings being retrofitted. So this was a phenomenal study that also really helped bring attention, I think, to this space, and really helped fill that gap, as I mentioned earlier, when folks asked, hey, talk to us about what the impact that GHPs will have. This will help. But we're not finished. We have phase 2 work that is underway right now. It's going to focus on a couple of different new facets of this study. One, seeing how GHPs can align with the administration's Justice 40 initiative, which is for, of course, 40% of funding and benefits to go to disadvantaged and underserved communities. I'll talk a bit more about a Justice 40 program we have within GEO in just a minute. And how they can accelerate the clean energy workforce transition. You know, we've talked a lot about workforce just at this conference. I mentioned I was camped out in the workforce sessions earlier. DOE definitely sees this need. We see the opportunity space here. We see how this industry is growing, and we understand that there's a workforce that needs to grow with it. So the analysis will also be focused on workforce. And then, of course, as we found these amazing results for the overall electric grid and decarbonization of the electric grid in the first part of our study, we will be focusing on that pathway for natural gas utilities to transition to geothermal. And I just want to kind of underline, maybe double underline, some points that have been made earlier around the future of geothermal being a utility-based system. We absolutely see that. We see the possibility, and in almost every presentation or panel that I participate in on building decarb, everyone talks about those on-site combustion emissions, right? Essentially the burning of natural gas, at your homes, in your buildings as being the last piece of building decarbonization that has to be tackled. Geothermal heat pumps can do that. And we're going to be looking at not only the potential that they show in that space, but also how natural gas utilities and their conversion to geothermal can be a really big part of that in the future. And just really quick shout out to this picture, not only because it shows our ranking official, Alejandro Moreno, within energy efficiency and renewable energy, actually previewing, or I should say announcing, this impacts report at the IGSHPA conference in December, which was great to have him be present. Again, another show of GOE's support and interest in this area. But also up here are Sean Porce and Jeff Winnick, the other two folks on the stage that are I guess it would be you all's right side of the picture. So Sean leads our DMA team, our data modeling analysis team, and Jeff was the technology manager that managed the work with labs on the impacts report. So I just wanted to give them a really quick shout out as kind of the owners, if you will, of the impacts piece. Really quickly, another lab project that is really important to bring awareness to is our work with NREL on their REOPT module. So we have been working with them on essentially a tool that will allow folks to go online and essentially plug and play to compare geothermal heat pumps and hybrid geothermal exchange systems using different information. So you go in, folks are able to enter very basic information, and then hopefully get some feedback on optimal solutions for their own heating and cooling. This is a good kind of publicly available tool. We recognize a lot of companies have their own tool as well, but want to make sure that this information is out there as you are interacting with folks who really want to say, like, hey, if I just want to get some basic information about what works for my building, where can I go? And REOPT is one of those places. All right, so now on to one of my very favorite, if not my favorite, we're probably not supposed to have favorites, that's okay, programs within DOE's Geothermal Technologies Office, which is our Community Geothermal Initiative. This was kicked off several years ago when DOE GTO saw the great emerging trend on US campuses and universities to transition to thermal energy networks, essentially. They hadn't been called thermal energy networks as much at the time, but these network systems that would do entire campus blocks or entire portions of campuses, use borehole fields that were thousands of boreholes, but we were really seeing them only on US campuses. Only very few were showing up in US communities. And as we look to see what can DOE, GTO, as a research, development, and demonstration organization, largely focused on technology, right, what can we do to help innovate in this space? And so we put out as a funding opportunity this Community Geothermal Initiative, and I want to draw everyone's attention to the circle graphic here, because this was very unique from a funding opportunity perspective. We essentially required that when folks came into us with applications for a thermal energy network for their community, that they would have all four of these groups represented. That they would not only have the traditional technical folks at the table, your deployment representatives who would actually install the system, your analysis and design folks, but you also would need to have community voice represented in your application to ensure that the community and the community's perspectives were taken into account as the system is being designed. And then one more reference to workforce, right? We said that you have to have somebody who can do local workforce development for your project to ensure not only that you would have going forward in time a local workforce to support the system, but also to help cultivate and develop the geothermal workforce in this particular space. And so these projects kind of had two, are intended to have 2 phases. We have 11 projects, which I'll show on the next slide, which are in phase 1 now. So they are in their design phase right now that were awarded. And this summer, we're actually going to have a down select where we have folks select information, or submit, information on their designs, and we will down select to a handful of folks for deployment. This is a big deal because technology offices don't get an opportunity to do a lot of deployment work. And this is the exception when we're seeing these really exciting projects. All right. And so here is the map, if you will, where the 11 projects are located. So across 10 states, we have two in Alaska. Really excited to see these groups continuing, and I'm just gonna, in the interest of time, keep going to give really quick highlights. So another important piece to us at DOE was, since these projects are essentially serving as case studies that we can shout to the world about how community geothermal can work just about anywhere. In the US, how thermal energy networks can work just about anywhere in the United States. We not only wanted to have geographic diversity, but we wanted to have population diversity. Right? I share one of the most common misconceptions I hear about geothermal heat pumps is that they cannot work in urban environments. Right? So we actually have an urban and suburban specifically focused group of projects, and then we also have rural and remote projects as part of this. So these will work in any different population situation that you find yourself in. And I won't go into all of the details on the 11 different projects because I'm quite sure that I don't have time for that. But I think what I would say is across the different urban and suburban, and I'll just kind of jump over to the next slide here. We have a lot of different configurations, right? We have hybridized systems that are geothermal plus others. We have folks that are looking at wastewater heat exchange, which I know is a very big trend in thermal energy networks right now. And we have folks that are looking at both 4th generation and 5th generation systems. So I think some have like one common loop that will provide heating and cooling. Some have separate loops. And again, we were kind of technology agnostic almost, that we were just looking for a variety of different technologies for these different systems. And then here's our quick snapshot of our rural and one remote and islanded community in Nome, Alaska as well. We are really proud that, again, I mentioned that this is a Justice 40 initiative, and reducing energy and environmental burden on communities and instances of fuel poverty is a very big focus of this initiative. So we're really excited that we were able to get over 40% of the projects that are either focused on disadvantaged or underserved communities and or part of tribal lands. I think I'll stop there and keep going in the interest of time. So you all saw on a previous slide, we had one project in community geothermal that was in Duluth, Minnesota. We actually have several projects in Minnesota, and I appreciate Ryan mentioning that Minnesota is saying this is their year of geothermal. I have to say, from our perspective, it sure seems that way as well. This project is separate, and the next one that I'll go through, also in Minnesota, are separate from our community geothermal initiative. They are, I think, what would commonly be referred to as earmarks. They're congressionally directed projects, which is essentially when, as part of our funding and our budget language, we get something that says you need to commit X dollars to X project in X location. It's very specific, as opposed to most of our funding where we're putting out large competitive funding opportunities like community geothermal that folks can then apply to. So this is congressionally directed project, again, is in St. Paul, Minnesota, for the Como Zoo, where they are actually converting the primate building to a geothermal system, which I thought was really interesting, and installing geothermal heat pumps. And then they're looking to transition, after they finish this project, to the visitor center, and then even hopefully the full main zoo at some point. So very exciting, different and unique application there. And then the city of Rochester is actually using some new technology, which I'll talk about in a minute, from our small business innovation research projects in order to create a district system for 4 different city buildings. This is really interesting because it is combining kind of the thermal energy storage with geothermal heat pump and district-based systems within the city of Rochester, and of course is replacing a steam line, which is one of the most common applications that we get questions about is I'm on a steam system, can I convert to geothermal? This will be an excellent example of a project that's able to do that. All right, and then I mentioned our small business innovation research. Who's part of a small business here? Anybody? Raising hands, small and medium businesses, wonderful. All right, so small business innovation research is a requirement actually across the federal government that we allocate a certain percentage of our funding to small business research proposals. So every year, actually, twice a year, GTO, as well as a number of other DOE offices, puts out a competitive solicitation that's essentially like small businesses, here are some ideas on things that different offices within the department are interested in learning more about and having you all research. And they are, I would say, scaled down proposals as compared to our normal, really onerous funding application process. So there's just two that I'm going to highlight here. One is mainstream engineering. Again, this is a coupling of solar and geothermal, which is really exciting. And I know our solar office has been really focused on how to store thermal energy, largely that, from concentrated solar power for them. But there's been a really great overlap in kind of this subsurface thermal energy storage space. And I think this is a great example of that project. So really looking to take that solar thermal, store it in the ground, combine it with a heat pump in order to be able to utilize overall essentially carbon and almost electricity-free hot water. And then this small business innovation research from Darcy Solutions is essentially a new innovative technology. This is the one that's being used in the Minnesota application, the 4-building system that I mentioned a moment ago, called Advactive GHP. And again, as I mentioned, it is thermal energy storage in shallow reservoirs, essentially using those reservoirs to contain that thermal energy and then use it later towards your benefit. And when you, in fact, need it or need additional capacity, it's there. We're seeing a lot of this coupling of thermal energy storage with GHP systems. I just want to acknowledge this trend. There's a lot of questions around sizing of GHP systems and the cost of systems, and we've seen a lot of folks that are going to that, design slightly smaller, save the capital, and include storage as an option to kind of fill that capacity gap when you need it. And now just quickly, I wanted to mention one of the really big outputs of the Inflation Reduction Act, which was to fund the Defense Production Act. Don't worry, there will not be an acronym quiz later. And that was to the tune of $250 million for the manufacturing of heat pumps in the U.S. I do say heat pumps purposefully here because this was not limited to geothermal or ground source heat pumps. This was meant as the Defense Production Act was the current administration saying, hey, we know that there are areas where we do not produce enough in the U.S. now, and of those 5 areas, geothermal and air source heat pumps was one of them. And so it was allocated $250 million as part of the Defense Production Act. Ultimately has gone through one round of funding, a little bit of an eye chart, but you can see this was run out of our MESC group, our Manufacturing Energy Supply Chain group within DOE. And essentially of the projects selected, there were 2 that include geothermal heat pump manufacturing, Ice Air in Spartanburg, South Carolina, and then Hydrotemp Corp, which is actually one of their 2 facilities right here in Albany, New York, which is exciting. And then MESC has put out a second funding opportunity where the concept papers were unfortunately due on March 15th, so this is not open now, but final applications for those who put in concept papers will be due on April 29th. And essentially this is the remaining money from that $250 million that they're putting out there. And it again is very focused on manufacturing of heat pumps in the US. Let's increase that domestic manufacturing. Let's make sure that we have the in-house manufacturing that is going to allow us to meet the demand going forward, because everyone sees and understands the Department of Energy that is going to be going up as we see these. As you come, oh, thank you. Another funding and opportunity, which I will say is open now. I promised folks I would talk about some open funding opportunities, is actually with the Office of State and Community Energy Programs, or SCEP. Again, completely different part of GEOE from the one that I work in, but doesn't mean that they do not have geothermal focused opportunities. So that's one of the great things about this technology spreading across the department. So we're starting to see these opportunities in a lot of spaces. So this is called the Community Sparking Investment in Transformative Energy. So it is broader than just geothermal, into all kinds of renewable energy and building decarb and building efficiency infrastructure. This is $18 million that's available, again, focusing on community systems, kind of like the community geothermal did. So for us, it would be 10 systems or GHP deployments to single buildings in communities. And that application period closes May 31st. So again, really encourage everybody in the room to take a look at that. And then the GHPs and the Inflation Reduction Act, again, I think this is probably a repeat from a lot of the discussions earlier, but essentially from a residential perspective, we have a 30% tax credit for geothermal heat pumps now. An important distinction between ground source and air source here is that air source has a cap of $2,000. Geothermal does not, ground source does not. So it is 30% credit through 2032. And then we, of course, for commercial have the investment tax credit. I know there's been a lot of discussion around some of the requirements for prevailing wage and apprenticeships. Really appreciate that feedback. I know Alejandro and the team got some of that feedback at IGSHPA. Encourage you all to keep that coming, because I think the more that we know about how these tax credits are impacting folks and how they're being interpreted and discussed and what problems folks are seeing, I think the more that we can kind of think on that and take that back to the Department of Treasury, which of course are the owners for the tax credits themselves. And we don't have a ton of collegiates in the room, I don't think, but I'll just mention really quickly, because we're talking about workforce, geothermal collegiate competition. So we run this every year, and in the last couple of years, it has always been focused on design of low temperature systems, on design of geothermal heat pump systems, usually for communities or tribes. And this year we actually had both a policy track and a tactical track. The policy track was new. It had just been technical design track before. And I mentioned this more to say, if you all have universities and are interacting with universities that you want to move into the workforce pipeline for this industry, really encourage them to have teams to submit to the geothermal collegiate competition. It typically launches in the fall, unsurprisingly, kind of with the start of the collegiate year, and we announce winners in the spring, and you can see some of the winners featured up here. And then just, we're trying really hard at the Geothermal Technologies Office to get resources out there we've updated our webpage. We have started to organize information in ways that I think is more relevant to this industry than it used to be. We just use words like low temperature and just use words like district heating when really we're talking about heating and cooling. So we've upgraded that a lot in the last 2 years and are really hoping to be a great resource, not only for everyone in the room here, but when you all need to point folks from an outreach and awareness perspective towards resources, that you have that partner in DOE. And I'll just close by asking, if folks are interested in receiving information about new funding opportunities that come out, even the ones from other offices that I mentioned, we post those on our drill down newsletter when they come out. Because again, we're trying to highlight for this industry whichever funding opportunities are going to be really exciting and relevant for you all. So sign up for our newsletter, and then we're always looking for merit reviewers for applications that come in. So if that's something that's of interest, please reach out, or you can go to geothermal.energy.gov, and there's a spot to sign up there. So with that, I'll just say how much I really appreciate, again, everyone's attention, especially over lunch when everyone just had a nice big spot of lasagna before I started talking. Thank you all so much for staying awake. I appreciate it. I hope that was helpful. And do we have time for questions? No, we don't. It's 1:30.
Let's take 8 questions.
8 questions?
We'll take it, but it's got to be the best question.
All right, no pressure, folks. Only the best question. Only the best. All right. Up front here, we've got the best question.
Dr. Manisha Rani Fondakaro from Soul-Led Solutions. What do you think of installing, doing geothermal digging at municipal water and wastewater treatment facilities? So we are co-locating, producing clean electricity, green hydrogen, and then geothermal heat pumps for district heating or things like that. Because I have Jigar Shah, he asked me to, I asked the question, he asked me to submit a proposal on this, so I would like to include geothermal along with that. Thank you.
Got it. Just so, did you say Jigar Shah from the Loan Programs Office? Okay, sorry, just making sure I'm hearing correct. I didn't even talk about the Loan Programs Office here. So yes, I think that the question that the purpose that the Loan Program Office or any part of DOE that's asking a question like that is ultimately going to be safety and ultimately thinking about the local community, right? There is a lot, as everyone in this room knows, right? There's a lot of sensitivities, particularly when it comes to groundwaters and aquifers. So I personally think that kind of project absolutely can work. I think that the genesis of the question is likely to encourage you as you're applying to articulate and reinforce how those systems can work safely together, would be my guess. All right, and with that, I'm happy to stay after if anyone else has questions or meet folks out in the hallway. Again, really appreciate everyone's attention. Thanks so much.
Great. Thanks, Alexis. That was terrific. Nice work.